Welcome everyone, Pete here with Triumph Performance Academy, and I help male leaders and business executives grow and scale to unprecedented levels of success while becoming the best father, husband, and servant leader possible. I'm glad you're here today, and I hope you enjoy the show. Well, hey, brother, it's good to see you, man. It's been a wild ride. It's great to see you. I just want to kind of start out by thanking you for your leadership, your mentorship, what you're doing, your mission, your business, how you lead others and how you inspire others. And I'm really just excited to show other people who you are and what you desire to show others. But in what I want to kind of show our listeners today is just how vital it is for a male leader in today's world to really be intentional, to be purpose-driven, be passionate, to be really focused on what's important. So I really want to have people learn a little bit more about you. I know you and I have worked together quite a bit over the last year, and it's been fun, and you've grown to be a real close friend of mine and a great brother in Christ. But I really want others to kind of hear a little bit more about you. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, man, pumped to see you kind of get this launched and see what's happening with it. You know, I think that's a huge part of my story, man. And I think for anyone listening to the show, I mean, if you're, maybe this episode is going to be most applicable to those who are really maybe in a season or a time where they're trying to reinvent themselves. I think that's kind of you too, and that I don't know about, maybe reinvent might be a strong word in your case, but there's a lot of people who do need to do that. Maybe they've been in a job or an industry where, it doesn't necessarily translate to what they want to do, right? They have a passion for something completely different, or, they're trying to break into a new industry and they don't have the experience yet, or they're seen as something else. And I can totally relate to that. I mean, I was a pastor, a college pastor for 6 years, and trying to break into the world of real estate. I mean, today we own over $100 million of real estate. We run the largest faith-based real estate mastermind. And you can look at me and be like, well, it's easy for Ellis now because he's got this mastermind, he's got his podcast, and he knows a lot of people in the industry. It's like, well, I didn't start there. You know what I'm saying? Like, I started with my entire network was 18 and 19 year olds. And so, that it's tough, man. I'm not gonna lie, but I mean, it's possible, I think is the good news. And it's never too late to pivot. And if you have a dream and a vision for what you want to accomplish, in this day and age, man, with social media and the accessibility to people, if you have seriously, the two things that I think helped me in this journey, man, is just a relentless will, like the mindset of like, I will never ever quit, and this flexibility to also pivot at times. And I think those might sound like opposites, but they're not. Like, they do go hand in hand of, I'm not going to give up on my dream, but it can morph a little bit, and you got to be able to pivot and kind of recreate your offer and recreate yourself. And so yeah, man. So I don't know if I answered anything about who I am, but I was a pastor for about 6 years, and now I run a real estate investment firm that focuses on multifamily acquisitions, and we run a faith-based real estate mastermind and coaching community called Kingdom REI.
Great. Yeah, you definitely touched on some of those key points that I wanted you to bring up, and those are, yeah, like you said, you've really broke out of the stereotype. You've had to transition industries and leadership roles and all that kind of stuff, and you've done so in a gracious manner. So I really respect that of you, and I think you've done a great job staying focused through it all and really pushing through doubt and pushing through mental barriers, belief systems, and you've done a great job turning around and then teaching the next person that. And so I really commend you for that.
Do you think, because what you're trying to really create this in other men as well, like, do you think it's a trait that has to be, how long does it take to really, I guess, cultivate kind of the things that we're talking about to recreate or reinvent yourself? Like, I feel like, man, I got this from my parents. Like, I watched my dad be an entrepreneur. I watched my mom have to start over multiple times after a few divorces. Like, it's part of who I am, where I meet a lot of people and they kind of want to become entrepreneurs, or they want to kind of go out on their own. And I'll be honest, I don't know if they have a chance because they haven't really developed in them the the fortitude, right? Or like there's so much work to do there. So I'm just curious on your thoughts as your investment into men and you developing and training folks, like what are the qualities that it takes to be successful of trying to kind of reinvent and recreate yourself?
That's a great question. I would probably echo what your statement was, which is part of it definitely is your upbringing. If you've been taught to kind of bootstrap and do what it takes to get through life, it definitely helps. I think if you come from kind of a scarcity background of kind of a victim mentality, it's real hard to break through that ceiling and you're going to really struggle. But I think it kind of comes down. I heard one leader really speak on like life's a quiz and it's like, how long are you going to take to write that SAT? Like you can either sit there for years or decades. You may not even write it ever, or you can just get after it. And I think that's what it comes down to is someone like you or someone like me or other people, you don't have another option. It's just, you just got to get after it.
Right.
But I think those that, if you see the people that are really successful, like the Elon Musks and a lot of these successful people, like they've gone bankrupt, they've had setbacks. I think Elon Musk started digging in a coal mine or gold mine up in the north. He did what it took to get to the top and it wasn't easy. And he had a lot of doubters along the way. And I think if you can push through all that and just kind of bull in a china cabinet at times.
Yeah, I think you come up with a good point. Like I think most people, the reason why, I don't even know if this is a topic we're going to talk about reinventing yourself, but I do think real estate is one of those spaces where a lot of people come in because they want to reinvent themselves, right? Or they want to recreate their career or their life. And the thing that I see most often that holds people back is they're unwilling to really give up kind of a level of comfort that they've gotten used to, right, in order to advance to the next level. And I think coming from a missionary background, like that wasn't very hard for me. My level of comfort, like I still have barely paid myself more, honestly, even though we're running, multiple six-figure company now, I still pay myself similar to what I pay. Like my level of comfort, and in some ways that was my advantage. Like I just got used to that level. But I do think, dude, I don't want to just feel like I'm pushing people down. What I want to actually give encouragement to say, I think the thing that helps me sometimes, man, when I'm really dreaming big or trying to go to the next level is, like I always ask myself, what's the worst case scenario? Like what would really happen if this fails? For most of us who grow up in America, I mean, dude, I'm American, I'm white, I'm well educated. Honestly, I got a lot of things, behind me, right? I mean, and that's just fortunate or not fortunate is what it is what I'm saying. And I think a lot of people find themselves in the same position that there's a lot more room they have to go and take risk for them to really hit, whatever it is in that fear. And I think that's one of the things, man, people got to play out. It's like, dude, go for it. Because the reality is like, there's so many things that would have to happen for you to live worst case scenario. And a lot of those would be like bad, ethical, moral decisions. Taking a risk for your career is not a bad, ethical, moral decision. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, or taking a big risk or making a big decision for your family is not a moral, ethical decision, right? And so I do think, man, that always helps me. As bad as this is, there's a street down in San Diego. We used to live in an apartment complex downtown, and homeless just kind of line the street, and it's a really unfortunate scenario. And a lot of those folks struggle with mental illness and kind of chronically homeless. And I have to drive down that street, or I used to be able to have to drive down the street quite often. And in some ways, man, every time I would drive down it, even though it would be kind of a very unfortunate sighting, it was a reminder of how many things would have to go wrong for me to be in this scenario. And it always was actually a motivator of like, what am I waiting on? Like, why am I not taking more risks? Because this is as worse as it can get. Like, this is as bad as it can get, and I am nowhere near this. Am I willing to give up this level of comfort that I have to really achieve something much greater? And I think that's a good question for a lot of people to really ask themselves.
And you really kind of segued nicely into the next question I had, which is, I see a lot of men, and I talk to a lot of men that I really ask them, like, it's really helpful for men to assess their current situation. And then like you've asked that same question. It's like, if you could wave a magic wand, where would you want to be? Then I always try to ask another question. to kind of, pivot their vision, which is like, if you don't change the course of action, if you maintain the default, or if this gets worse, where does this put you? Like, how bad does it get? And I feel like a lot of male leaders, I've seen hundreds, if not, I would say hundreds of corporate leaders in my career that have really got comfortable, or they've denied where things are bad. There's things that are dumpster fires in their life, and they're too comfortable, or they're too fixated on one area that they let other areas get out of hand, and they refuse to address that situation, or they refuse to see how bad it's getting, or they're just too scared to pivot and do what it takes to get healthier, to heal relationships. Because sometimes it's professionally they're making bank, but on the personal side, it's a mess. So I was going to ask you, like, what would you say has been pivotal for you, just both maintaining being able to pivot when it was necessary, and B, just really doing what it took to become professionally and personally, well-rounded?
And I'm so fortunate, man. Like, God has put so many great people in my life. So one of the things I started doing in college, and it was not the decision I made, it just was kind of the ethos in which I grew up in terms of my faith, is that I was always part of a small group. And, always part of a weekly accountability group, Bible study with guys. And, the more, what I've realized is kind of getting at, now that and then I went and worked for that same ministry for 6 years. So then I was still kind of in this weekly rhythm, dude, of just meeting with other men and being accountable and sharing sin and sharing wins, sharing losses, sharing, the struggles, rather that be even things down to, man, I just am feeling incredibly lustful this week, or whatever it might be. I have found that to be incredibly odd compared to, like, it's incredibly countercultural to the rest of the world, or the rest of society. I shouldn't say the world, but outside of that kind of Christian bubble that I was in, for men to get together and share those things, even in church, dude, like even in an adult church, like a small group setting, I still have not found a small group setting in our churches that there's that level of transparency and accountability. Like, I think that takes a lot of time and trust to build. And so that would be one area, man, and that I'm even trying to kind of get back to now, is just finding that level of vulnerability and trust between guys to really be able to share that, because that's huge. I think we do hold a lot of it in, man, and I do think no one makes a decision to cheat on their, like, the first decision if someone commits adultery or infidelity is not having sex with another woman. It's staying too long on that television show, or staying up too late on Instagram, and having a longer conversation than needed at the gym with someone else. You know what I mean? Like, those things begin to kind of build up. So the earlier you're able to confess, and someone would be like, "Hey, idiot, stop," has been huge, and is a good reminder. Two is, man, I married up. And I do have a wife who does remind me and helps me know, and reminds me when, I have neglected family for work, because I am ultra ambitious. I am ultra success driven. I like to win, and I probably would not slow down if there weren't things like that in my life. And so I would just say, man, the things and the people that I put around me, because if it was left to me, I would probably just kind of bulldoze people and neglect things that are important. And I think I realized that about myself. Maybe the only credit I would take is I do know, I am aware. I'm aware I have a problem, and I'm open to constructive feedback and criticism on that. Hope that helps.
That's great. And I know we were talking before, but we've got a men's podcast that we call the 100% male, and really we try to, and I think you kind of blew that one out of the water, but we really show that most people will show you 98% of who they are, but the last 2%, that closet stays closed, and they're very hidden in terms of their transparency. They don't want to show people the dirt. Everyone wants to have that Instagram profile that's polished and clean, and whether it's even in the church, like the leaders in the church typically have a very polished exterior to them. But I think in the real world, a lot of men that are struggling with economic downturns, financial uncertainty, relational issues, kids and pressures of society. Like it's easy to start to try to board these things up and, try to segment them, get them out of your vision. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind, but eventually these things pile up. And like you said, if you don't have a good network, if you're not transparent, if you're not willing to get real and get transparent and accountable with other people in your life, it can spiral real quick. And I think a lot of people in society, a lot of men in society these days they've let a lot of things fall apart, and maybe they might have a fat 401k or a great portfolio of under management, but if they got nothing else, they go home and they're depressed and they have nothing at home, what was it all worth?
Right.
You've kind of answered the question already, but I'm just going to ask you just for context, but what would you just say to someone that had 100 million under management and the next year was looking like they were going to hit 250, but yet they were just, their physical, their relational, their spiritual, their mental was a mess? What advice would you provide to that guy?
I mean, if he was open to listen, that's another thing. I mean, most people aren't, and especially if you're still in growth mode, it's hard to slow down. So if he would listen, what I would tell him is that, or maybe what I would encourage him to do is just find other men who are as ambitious as you are, and are serious about winning, as serious as you are, who are as competitive as you are, and just want to win in more areas than just business. And I think what we don't realize, we kind of put ourselves, when you get to that level in your career and you are kind of the top of your circle, you think, man, there's no one else out here as ambitious as I am, and no one really gets what I'm doing. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Like, that's not true, dude. Like, there's a lot of great, ambitious, hungry people who also value family and marriage and alone time. And so I would just say, get around other people who celebrate more than just business success, because until you see it being done, it's really hard to kind of do that on your own. So I think that's always been helpful for me, is just putting myself around people who are as ambitious as I am, or maybe more, and definitely more successful than I am, and yet still able to kind of win in other areas of life. And so if there was an advice I could give, it would just be, man, seek that out. Like, I'm not saying you can't go to 250. Maybe you can go to 500, because 100, 250, I mean, that you still, like, it's still small. Like, there's people with a lot bigger portfolios than that, and taking care of their family and their community and whatnot. And so it's not like it's not possible. I mean, that's just ridiculous. It's just that you don't have a context or a framework for what life really looks like to be able to do both. And so you need mentors ASAP.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. Is like you said, you got a beautiful wife and you've been really blessed that way. But I think for you to find it, to level up in terms of the company you keep, like I know Tony Robbins is big on that find someone that aspires you, or that inspires you, that really pushes you. If you want to get to a certain place, find someone that got there and then mimic what they did. And I think, like you said, it'd be great if every man in America was incredibly successful, but did it the right way, rather than finding success at a cost that they could never get those days back. They could never get those relationships back. They could never.
And I would say this: if you have $100 million of real estate under management, money's probably not an issue for you at the moment, right? So just go spend, like, here's what I've learned, man. People who are successful, ambitious, time is way more important than money. And so that's why I spend money in masterminds. Like, go spend 50 grand and put yourself in a room full of people that you want to be like, that are, and not just in the sense of like, they're like me, 10 years down the road, unhealthy, but no, like, they're the best version of me, and I'm saying, like, go, spend the money to get around people who value time more than money, and who also are willing to spend the 50 grand to get in the room. And that way, that when you show up in this room, you're not wasting time, because everyone there has spent the money, and a lot of money, to make sure they get the most out of this time. And so for me, masterminds have been a great investment. I've spent more than 6 figures in the last 2 years investing in personal development, education masterminds. And it's been probably the greatest investment I've made as a, young entrepreneur, follower of Christ, husband, father, for sure.
It's like you're reading my mind because you're just one step ahead of me every time. But yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask you is how valuable has coaching been to you in your journey and mentorship? And you just touched on that. But I think that's another thing where I think a lot of people in society, a lot of men, they kind of just fake it till they make it. And I know that mantra works sometimes, but it doesn't work when you're tripping up, you're running on three flats. It's like you can't fake that stuff. And if you're doing something and there's a net cost to you every time you do that, if you go to work, if you acquire assets, if you are in whatever vocation and it's costing you because you're sacrificing elsewhere, if it's a net loss, then you really need to find someone to help you to kind of reevaluate and find out what you're doing wrong and how to do it right. But I know you've spent a lot of time in coaching and finding key mentors, and for me too, that's been a powerful piece of my life. And it's the same thing. I've spent well over 6 figures on personal counseling, on personal coaching, on marriage counseling, on business coaching, and every penny I spent was worth it. And it's made me who I am today, but it's also helped me to kick the stupid out of me at times where I was just doing everything wrong.
I mean, you have coaches in every area of life, right? Yep. You have a coach and most of us grew up with coaches. We had a coach for our sports teams, right. Like we had a teacher to teach us different things. Probably would invest in a business coach, or you've had business coaches or investment mentors. And I would say, I now have a coach for my training, right? Because that's something I want to take serious. I think if anything, like if you're trying to really advance or accelerate in any area of life, a coach is a good idea. Like it's someone who's objective. And I think that's really key, is finding someone who's objective in those areas of your life. That's been the most helpful for me, is just finding people who are more objective, meaning like it's not a friend, a close friend, it's someone who's just like, hey dude, I care about you, but at the same time, like, he's not so tied to all of the different relationships in my life. He's just like, this is what it takes to, in my business. If you want to go do that, if you want to go acquire $1 billion of real estate, this is what it's going to take. It's like, I'm like, okay, good. All right. I got it. Thanks. And so that's been so key.
Hey man, I really appreciate your time. And like I said, I love you as a brother, and it's been cool to work together over the last year, just within the Kingdom REI. And if anyone wants to get a hold of you, how could they give a quick pitch on what you've got going and how they can connect with you?
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're, a high income earner, you're a business owner, an entrepreneur. Imagine most folks listening to this are, we run a real estate investment firm. We've, my company essentially is creating alternative investment opportunities for the passive investor. So we purchased about $100 million of real estate in 2021. And 2022 is already looking really good. And so we've created just an opportunity for folks to come alongside of us and invest in kind of wealth building opportunities, particularly multifamily. So if interested in that, go to symphonycapitalgroup.com is the best place to kind of learn more. And then follow me on Twitter, man, Ellis_Hammond, or on YouTube. Those are kind of the two places that you can definitely see or hear more of my content. Twitter's probably my most honest, open, vulnerable thoughts each day, and would love to interact with folks there on Twitter. Symphonycapitalgroup.com, or hit me up on Twitter.
Excited to see you again in the future, Ellis. Excited to see you at the upcoming masterminds, and excited to work with you in the future.
Me too, brother. Appreciate it, man.
Love you, brother. See you, man.